Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my studio. How are you today? Just gonna take a minute to get set up here. Hi, Joanne. So today we're going to work with texture in our paintings. We're going to explore all the different ways that you can build texture using acrylic paints and just regular household items. This is a really good session if you have things, old projects and stuff that you don't know what to do with and you want to recycle. This is a really good project to try that out, to recycle some of your drawings. There's really so much you can do. Hi, Denise. I included links to a couple of artists that I could just dredge up in my mind. The links are in the description, but I will share them now. This is a local artist. Her name is Rachel McGinnis, and she uses old quilts and all kinds of different applications with acrylic paint. Hey, Sarah. Her work is really, when you see it in real life, it's really moving. She uses transfers, which we're not going to do today. She uses all different ways of processes with acrylics and old textiles. And we are going to use some fabric today, which I have a bunch of on hand. So she's a good one to look at. And actually, there is a gallery when galleries start opening up again. The Tracy Morgan Gallery on Cox Avenue shows her work. So I definitely recommend checking her out. The other artist I would just wanted to call attention to is Mark Bradford. And here's a link. There's a really good video on this link of his process doing this installation at the Hirshhorn Art Museum with layers and layers of paper and acrylics, and pulling away things and tearing away at things, exposing things. It's really a beautiful video. So I recommend checking those two artists out at some point, maybe when we're done today. But I just, as I was preparing today, I was like, oh my gosh, there's just so much you can do with acrylic paints, with texture, with building textures. So hopefully I'll just address some of the basics to you, and then you can have at it and explore this for weeks to come. So let's see. Some of the items that I have in my vicinity that you might want to have as well are freezer paper, a freezer paper palette, and I'll talk about why in a second. But this is what I always work on. So freezer paper, another, any kinds of acrylic paints. Now, in my classes, I tend to go over a lot of different products that you can buy, but today we're going to explore with mixing things into our paint to change the texture. So any kind of acrylic paint is good. You might have handy also some glue. I don't actually have any. I've left it all at AB Tech, unfortunately, but you could use some Elmer's glue today. Any kind of water-based glue like that, or acrylic glue, not rubber cement. Thanks, Denise. Hey, Roberta. So let's see. And then acrylic gel medium. I'm really worried I'm going to get kicked off for showing the label, but basically what this is acrylic paint with no pigment in it. It's a thick, it's white, but it dries clear. This is like what acrylic paints are made of. It's this acrylic-based material, and it's a really good adhesive. So you might have some of that on hand. But basically what the primary exploration here is that your acrylic paints are adhesives. You can stick things into them. You can build textures with them. And just knowing that, it's like, wow, the sky is the limit. Other things I have around me right now are just things from around my house. I've got an eggshell from my breakfast this morning. I've got some coffee grounds. I've got cornstarch, powdered sugar, different things like that to mix into my paints to change the texture. I also have, like I said earlier, some old fabrics, twigs, leaves, buttons, glitter, beads, anything like that is great today. Shells. This is some really cool mica that I found. Isn't that amazing? That I might adhere, but I also just like it in like this. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to use that. But sorry, I dropped that. But yeah, and again, like I said, this is also a really good day for if you have an old painting you want to paint over. Great. I'm going to be working huge here, but you do not have to. You could do small paintings. Okay, so let's just get started. Number one, I wanted to show you, because I've been talking about this in my other lessons, but you may or may not have caught it. This is an example of taking my old palette of paints, when it's loaded with a bunch of paints when I'm done with the painting session. Hi, Charlotte. So glad you're here. So this is an example of taking an old palette of paint before it's, I'm about to be done with my painting session, and taking a piece of paper towel and putting it in the paint and letting it absorb, letting the fibers of the paper towel absorb the paint, let it dry, and then I'm going to just show you, you can peel this off, and you have this like really cool material now that you can work with. So I know you can't do that now, but just telling you in the future. So look at how cool that is. And it has these polymers in it. So it's this really wonderful texture of paper to work with. So I've got like tons of these handy. So I'm going to be using a lot of this kind of stuff today. If you don't have any of these, you could also just use regular old paper towels today for some of the project. I also tried this with a piece of fabric. So this was like a blue linen, cotton. I'm not sure what this is, what material this is. But again, just filling it up. Look at how it's actually also cleaning my palette, which is kind of cool. But yeah, so now I have this really cool texture of this cool material that I can work with. Roberta, if I'm working on a fresh mix very soon. So yeah, if you, I'm going to work on this. So because today is all about creating texture, I want to show you first some ways that you can build up texture on a canvas. So if you are working on something that you bought from a store, like, a canvas like this or a canvas board, I just want to talk a little bit about gesso and primers because sometimes people are confused. This is gesso. And basically what gesso is it's similar to white acrylic paint, but it's thinner. And what it does is it covers porous surfaces and makes them non-porous so that you can build your paint layers on top. If you didn't use something like this, your surfaces, your wood panels or your canvases would be super absorbent, and the paint would just kind of bleed into the fabric, into the fibers, which has its own appeal. But people will use gesso to prime surfaces to make them ready to put paint on top of. Now, if you buy something like this, it's already primed. But sometimes what I do is I'll take it out of the wrapper and I'll take a piece of sandpaper and sand it down, and then put another coat of primer on it, sand that down. In my classes at AV Tech, I don't usually do that. And you do not have to do that today, because today I want to show you about building texture. So one of the things you can do, actually, I also want to just say it's not the same as white acrylic paint. You shouldn't substitute it for white acrylic paint. It's a lot chalkier than regular paint, but it is an acrylic-based medium. Back in the day, in the Italian Renaissance, people used rabbit skin glue to prime their boards and their canvases. A little fun fact, and some people still use that. Okay, I'm going to use a little of this so you can just see how this works. It's quite thick like that. And here's something I did in a class. Some of you may recognize it, but I'll just show you. I'm over it. I'm not going to work on it anymore. So you can just paint with the gesso right over something. Now, you may notice I have things already on the surface here. So as I'm painting over that surface, some of that texture is coming through. We're basically going with that concept when we start our painting today. We're going to build a texture on our surface that when it dries, we can paint over it. So I thought for today, whatever canvas you have, pretend it's a landscape. Just pretend it's, we're just doing a very stylized landscape. So you might break it up into different sections. First thing I'm going to do to create texture, one of the ways I could create texture is I could simply take my paint and work really thick with it and build up globs with it and let that dry. That's number one. And I used to do this a lot back in the day. I would take what's called modeling paste, and I would take a credit card and I would just like put it on and create like these thick peaks of texture that when they dried, I could paint over them. Another really fun way to create texture is to take a paper towel. I'm going to saturate mine with a little bit of water, like this. Now mine has color in it, yours might not. And then smush that into there. Hope you can see that. I'll try to put this a little closer. Let that dry, and then that's a really interesting texture to work on as well. Like it's an interesting surface that you can work on. So what you might try doing, if you want to paint along today, is divide whatever canvas you're working on, divide it into maybe different sections where you could try these different techniques out in different sections, if that helps you. So I'm just really saturating this piece of paper, this paper towel, with product. So when it dries, it's going to be really hard, and it's a really cool and interesting surface, like I said, to build on top of. Another thing that you can do if you have like a container handy is take a little bit of water, take some paint. You can also use Elmer's glue and make like a little bath that you're going to dip the paper into to really get the the fiber saturated and then put it on there. This will work really well for fabric as well. I'm going to use some fabric right now. So let's say you're working with a really cool fabric and you're like, but I like the print and I don't want to ruin the print. Gel gloss is what you want to use. Yeah, you want to use something that's transparent. So gel medium is a really good thing to use, or acrylic paint, or I'm sorry, Elmer's glue, like I said before. So I have this cute piece of fabric from Jill. Thanks, Jill. Not sure if you're watching, but she gave me a bunch of really awesome vintage materials one day, and I've been using them a bunch. So what you can do is take this and really saturate the fibers of this in like a little pool of material. See, I'm getting so messy. Here we are. This all looks white, but it's going to dry clear. So I'm just I'm mixing a little water in there so it gets liquefied. Roberta, yes. If we don't have gesso, we can use the gel gloss instead. Absolutely. So right now what this is mostly clear acrylic medium, water, and there actually is a little bit of gesso in there too. So it's not going to be completely transparent. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to soak this in here and get it really saturated with that material. Having a bigger container might help also. All right, I got to put this down for a second. And you can do this process with papers as well, but some papers will break up, which is why I don't always do it. So now I've got, this is just coated with this substance. And then I can really like lay that right on there and kind of control how it goes on. I kind of like stretching the fabric out like this, but you could also wrinkle it up, create some texture with it. I'm just going to go with that. But yeah, that's going to stick now. So yeah, fabrics are great to use because they're so soft, so sturdy. They really hold up to a lot of wear and tear. So that's fabrics, paper. I'm gonna do a little bit more paper here. I'm gonna use up more of this stuff that I have here. I like this yellow a lot. So since this has a lot of paint in it, I'm gonna do better using an acrylic adhesive, like a paint or medium to adhere this as opposed to just glue. So Elmer's glue is really good for paper to paper and sometimes paint to paper, but the heavier and more like loaded with paint my materials are, the more likely I am to use a paint or an acrylic based adhesive. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just taking my gesso, putting it on the back side of this, and I'm going to use that now to adhere this. This already has a lot of texture already in it. Hi, Lisa. Since I'm adhering paper to canvas, I am going to need a lot of this material to really get that on there. How's everyone doing? Hi, Bob. Is that someone? I don't know if that's someone else. All right, so I'm just using whatever I have handy to get this adhered since I'm working so large. So that makes a really cool texture now. I could paint over it, I could leave it. I'm just gonna work a little bit more in this corner. So yeah, with this paper, I can tear it, but I love using it because it's stuff I would have thrown out anyway. And I don't like to throw things out. So it might help you to work flat, but I'm doing it this way so you can see what I'm doing. Hi, Barbara. Good morning. This is exciting. I like the links to other artists. I'm so glad. Yeah, definitely check those links out, everyone, when you get some time, because those artists are great. There's a lot of artists that use acrylics, acrylic painting medium to create a lot of texture in their paintings. So since acrylic paint isn't adhesive, something you could play around with is using it now to adhere whatever items you have around the house. So this is going to work better with your canvas flat, which I'm not sure if I'll be able to do. This is a super heavy canvas someone gave me. I can barely lift it. Okay, but I have an eggshell here, and I'm going to crunch it up. I remember we used to do this back in grade school on paper. We would put eggshells down and then paint it, and it would look like mosaic tiles. Did any of you used to do that? I don't know if this will work this way. I like to just kind of crunch it in there. You know, it's not, I'm going to do this on my little canvas over here. This one. So I'm going to just slather some of this acrylic. This is the gesso, but I'm going to use some actual white paint. So you can do something like this and just leave that texture. Something about acrylics is when they dry, they shrink a little bit. So sometimes you'll create a really dramatic texture with your acrylic paint, and then it dries and it doesn't look as exciting, unfortunately. Yeah. So that's why sometimes if you take things and put it into your paint, those textures are more likely to hold up. I am so totally making a mess here. So I'm just sticking this right in there. Something I like to use at school is pencil shavings. What else do I have here? Um, I have some coffee. Oops, labels. So yeah, I'm throwing some coffee in there. This is like the breakfast painting. Now I could just leave it on there and shake this off, and a lot of that would stay, but I'm also just gonna mix it in there to create this interesting rough texture. An aesthetic that I really love is to take something very coarse and then put something very shiny and sparkly with it. So like creating a coarse texture and then putting a bunch of glitter on it. I love that look. That's me personally. So I've created this kind of a texture now. So when this dries, I could paint over it, um, or just leave it like that. There's the eggshells up there. My cat is begging me to go outside. One moment. Kitty. Let's see, other things I have here. Hey, Alana. By the way, everyone, I finished my cat painting from last session. I'm going to just show it. Here it is. Yay. Okay, texture. Something that's fun to do is to take a Q-tip. I mean, you can, paint with a Q-tip, but what I like to do is pull off the cottony part and stick that into things. I just stick it right into that since it's there. But yeah, like I said, acrylics are a really strong adhesive, so you can just keep building and building texture. So other things you can try doing is mixing stuff into your paint to change the viscosity of it before you paint with it. So this was my little experiment this morning. This was a color, this old paint someone gave me from the 90s. It's this weird color. And then I mixed all kinds of things. I mixed powdered sugar into it. I mixed cornstarch into it. And it made it like this ooey gooey consistency that you can't really buy paint in. So that's kind of interesting. I'm not in love with this color, but what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to mix a little white in there. I mean, that's like such a funny texture. And I have this yellow that I like. This is acrylic high flow ink. So I'm going to put a drop of that in there. and make like this swirly concoction. I'm going to attempt to do something with this. Let's see. It's not working. I'll put it on the dark area so you can see it. Well, we'll just see what happens. So from here I could dig through that. A couple of weeks ago we used a pencil eraser, which of course I don't have on hand. I have this rubber tipped marker or rubber tipped brush. So this is a lot like when we were doing those abstract paintings. But yeah, play around with adding different things into your paint to see what kinds of textures you can get. I'm going to show this up close because it's hilarious. It is like ooey gooey dripping. I kind of like it. Okay, so you might think about creating layers here. Like I said earlier, build up a certain kind of a landscape and just play around with different materials that you can attach into your painting using your acrylic paint as an adhesive. Let's see. So if anyone is working out there and has discovered something interesting, please share it with us. The textures are great to add an interesting dimension. Yes. So yeah, like I said, when this dries, I could paint on top of this for a nice texture. I also want to show some of you may remember this from one of my classes, but there is a little bit of a texture, like I can feel it here. So what I could do now is I'm going to take a couple drops of this purple and put it into some paint, just so you can see. You can see how that's pulling out the texture now. Or what you could do is pretend it's kind of like a stain where you paint on it, and then as it's still wet, take a paper towel with a little water on it and just wipe it off. And it will collect in some of those grooves, and you can see how that's creating the texture as well. And then of course you can create textures. So these are called, this is like actual texture that we're creating, and you can also create what's called implied texture with your brush. Something that looks, it's not necessarily a texture that you would touch and feel a difference, but it's implied. It looks like fur or it looks coarse. These fan brushes are fun for that. So I have a few colors going in here. I like to just layer those marks. That's one way. You might experiment and just see how many different textures you can show with your brush. Another fun trick is to take masking tape, which of course, and put down some kind of a design with your masking tape. And then paint over that. I'm going to use my gunked up paint. Another thing that's so great about all these products, all these acrylic products, is that they're compatible with each other. So you can just be mixing things together. So I'm going to paint over this. And then I can lift it off. And I've got a cool mask. And I could actually use this somewhere else in the painting if I wanted to. To make sure it adheres for good, you could put acrylic behind it. Actually, I think I'll do that. So this is clear gel. My brushes. Stick that in there. Just stuck it into the acrylic gel to be sure that it would stay permanently. or I just like that masked off look, so I'm gonna do this. My hands have so much dirt, so much paint on them. Another really cool mark that you can make is to take a really thick paint. I'm going to use up this blue because I don't really love it. And put it down. And get like a good heavy piece of paper. And smash it down. I'm going to press this from the back side also. Actually, I can't. Let's see if this works. Again, this is something that might work a little better if you're working flat. But when you pull it off, it can make a neat texture. This isn't big enough. But it leaves like these really cool vein type things on there. Let's see. I'm going to do another one. You can start to see some of that texture now. And see, it makes a pretty texture there too. Do one more, see what happens. Very light. But yeah, I love this side now too. So I'm gonna just hold on to that and use that for something also. But yeah, you could be getting really intense here with your textures. You can really be like, here's a used up paper towel. I'm gonna just glob the rest of my materials on there. I'm gonna use this to clean off stuff. Got my eggshells in there. And then I could glob this into my painting. Got some of this other stuff. I'm just using this to clean everything off. If you go and watch that video with Mark Bradford, he would do all these layers and layers of paint, and he would put a rope down. And when it dried, he would do all layers of paint and paper and put a rope down. And then when it dried, he pulls the rope up to create interesting lines. So that's something you might think about doing too. You could put thread down, do a painting. When it dries, pull it off and see what it leaves for you. Put this down here. I love just like draping and sticking stuff onto the canvas like this, especially when you're working big. It can be a really fun. This needs more paint. But I love seeing like the draping of that and the holes coming through. It's just really fun. Jamie, if you're on there, can you share the name of the guy on, you shared his name on Instagram, and he sticks like clothes and stuff into his paintings. I cannot think of his name, but if you know it off your head, can you please type it in? I'm not even sure if you're there. I like that whole thing. I'm gonna come in here and try to tear away at some of this too. I give it that distressed look. Kind of an interesting look too. Wow. This is really gotten interesting. So then, there's always like your coffee filter. You could paint something like this first and then put it up. Let's see. I am going to I'm going to use this. I'm going to spray this with some water. It sticks down to my freezer paper. And then I've got this old gold paint that I want to use up. It's really kind of funky looking, actually. But I am going to glob some of that onto my coffee filter here. And then the glitter comes out. Howard Sherman. If you guys have Instagram, check out at Howard Sherman for some interesting textures and such. Okay. Got my glitter. I'm gonna sprinkle it on there. Because you guys, I told you I love that look of like coarse and glittery. It's one of my favorite contrasts, textures, aesthetics. See? And then I could let this dry and then peel it off and then apply it somehow. And I'll probably do that, actually. I really feel compelled to peel it off and adhere it this way. But your coffee filters or I'm sorry, your freezer paper is great because you can just do these fun things on it, let it dry, peel it off. If you want to make acrylic skins, I thought no glitter. Did I say no glitter? I know, I can't help it. Well, I'm not going to put this in my piece, but there it is. If you want to make acrylic skins, so those are basically it's an acrylic painting with no canvas. What you do is you use your paint very thick on freezer paper, let it dry, and then you peel it off like fruit leather, and then you apply it with paint. So I have an example here. I'm not saying this is the prettiest example, but these are all, like this right here is a skin that I made. It was clear. This also. And then I applied it like a collage technique, putting up paper into the medium. Here's another one. I used a very thick modeling paste to create this kind of frosty effect. But all of these are actual acrylic skins that I cut up and then adhered with paint, essentially. This is another one. I could never actually do this on a canvas. Oh yeah, Jason does not like the glitter at all, but I can't help it. This is hilarious how much that's dripping. I really kind of like that. So I'm curious if any of you are doing anything cool. Another fun thing is stencils, of course. I don't have any stencils here, unfortunately. But taking also books to use is like music, paper. So really, I hope you just get the lesson that the sky is the limit. Some products that I have not used that you could try using are hair gel. If you have hair gel, that is real. You can actually mix that into your acrylic paints to alter the texture of it. Poppy seeds, yes. Any kinds of pepper, any kind of stuff like that. I actually had brought out a bottle of Advil that I was gonna, but then I thought maybe we'll need that, so I didn't use that. But yeah, there's things you can actually also add egg whites to your paint as a binder, as like something you can use in, like, instead of glazing medium, you can use egg whites. So there's really tons of things you could just experiment with to add to your paint, build up layers, create textures. Uh, if you do anything, I'd love to see them. Again, please send me your paintings. Um, I will get around at some point to posting new paintings onto my blog. I haven't had a chance, but yeah, please send me any of the work that you do because I'd love to share it with other people. So we have a couple more minutes. If you have any questions, let me know. If you have any ideas, interesting things that happened while you were painting today, or uh, aha moments you had, please let me know. For the next class, for Thursday's class, what I'm considering doing is integrating a few paintings that I've made, and a couple of them I've made during these sessions. So I want to talk about how you can take your different paintings and compile them into a new painting, and different techniques you might try and different things you can try. So you might want to get out more old paintings, sketches, um, and play around with that with me on Thursday. Um, so I hope you all had fun. Couple more minutes if there's any questions or comments or thoughts that you're having. I find this process really fun, and I hope you do too. Curious about putting the example, poppy seeds on canvas and then painting or mixing them into the paint first. Yeah, you could spring them onto the wet paint, or you would mix them into the paint, yeah, and paint with them that way. Either one's going to work. They're going to be a slightly different um, result. Since this is all wet still, I haven't really had a chance to paint over it. But I don't know. I think I'm going to leave a lot of this. We'll see. I'm not sure if I'll work more on this or what's going to happen. All right, you guys. Well, I'm going to sign off. Thanks so much for joining me today. It's really great to see everyone on here. Thanks for saying hi. And feel free to tell your friends about this if you think that they'd have fun. Please share my channel with them. And have a really fun week. I'll see you in a couple days. I'll see you on Thursday morning. All right. Bye.